Hey, how's it going, guys? Most of y'all know who I am. Jimmy. Yeah. Uh, Basically, if you're not familiar with Maya or Unity, because Maya and Unity, they both have the very, very similar user interfaces. This tutorial video is basically going to be showing you how to navigate through the user interface, as well as some different controls and different tabs. When you first open up Maya, I know that Full Sail is used in 2016. I'm using 2018. It costs an arm and a leg. I'm not going to lie. My wallet still cries. So you're going to see all these tabs up here at the top. You'll see all these little, I guess you'd say, drop-down menus. And if you click on one, you're going to be like, oh man, some of these just have a lot more. You don't worry about that. A lot of the stuff we won't even be using. Good example of this, if you click on this and you go down to rigging and animation through the game design program, from what I understand, you will never have to touch those. Oh, and Daryl, if you are watching this and you approve this tutorial, I do give you permission to show future students if you think it'll actually help them within their Full Sail degree. So I just want to kind of get that out of the way. Okay, so starting off, go and click up here. So up here at this tab, this is the poly modeling tab. For this first assignment with a picnic table, this is actually where you're going to be spending the majority of your time. I'm not going to get too much in depth with this video, but I will start with the navigations and things like that. So if you just click on a cube, this little box icon, you'll see that it has that tool selected. Now you can drag and you can create a little plane, but then it'll say drag up to set the height. So then you once you release and you hold down the mouse button again and drag up, you can create a cube doing that. The other option you have is just to click on a cube and just select anywhere on the grid, just one single tap. So that's how you create your poly primitives. The majority of the time whenever I create these poly primitives, I usually do it by the second way. An itch. So whenever you have to navigate around the scene, because you will have to, you can't just work in this one window and it'll all be hunky-dory. The best way to do that, or actually I guess the only way to do that, if you hold down Alt and left click, this will allow you to rotate around your scene. And whenever you hold down Alt once again, middle mouse click, this will allow you to move around your scene. And then lastly, holding down Alt and right clicking is what allows you to zoom. So it's going to feel kind of weird at first, I'm not going to lie. I remember when I first started learning this, it was the same for me. Shortcut keys. So if you need to select something, you can simply press Q on the keyboard. This will open up your selection tool right here. In fact, if I off-click that, you're going to start seeing these start moving. If you press W, this right here is called your translate tool. Press E, this is your rotate. Press R, this is your scale. Now, Maya does have what's called I think it's called a universal transform tool, and it's up here somewhere, but honestly, I never use it. I just don't have any need to use it, so it's up to you. It's there somewhere, I just don't know where. I think it's called a manipulator tool or something, I don't know. I've never had to use it. So one thing I would highly recommend when it comes to any kind of object, if you're kind of unsure about the way an object would look like, obviously we all know what a picnic table is, for this future assignment. But if you're unsure about how to go about building one or what good dimensions would be or anything like that, we'll just open up Handy old Google. So let's type in picnic table. My computer's not happy with me. Okay, so we have some picnic tables right here. And obviously you can go through here, you can find wooden ones and things like that. A lot of images, like, we're not in game art, but if, say, someone wants you to make a decent looking character, a lot of times you're going to be looking at orthographic files, or going to be looking at blueprints. Such as like modeling for vehicles, you're going to be looking at blueprints for those. So, what I'll do is a lot of times I will actually open this up in a new window, and I have two screens, so I'm actually dragging it off to the side, which means I can't see myself, but that is okay. So, I think I'm going to start off with the cartoon first. I guess it really doesn't matter. So, in this image, we can see that we have two boards that kind of make like a little, I guess you'd say like forward slash and backslash, I don't know. The reason why I like creating polyprimitives just by clicking, most picnic tables are made out of 2x4s. So one of the advantages I have of doing this, I actually need to talk about this, subdivisions width, height, and depth. So before I get into the picnic, I'm going to talk more about the polyprimitives real quick. I apologize. Okay, so on the subdivisions, right now this is just a simple cube, a box, which has 6 faces, 6 sides. The more you increase this, as you can see, now we're adding, we're adding edges. The purpose of adding edges is, let me go ahead and just duplicate this because I'm going to want another one here in a minute. So the purpose of adding edges to these, by adding edges you can, and to bring up this menu, whenever you have an object, you don't even have to have it selected. Just hover the mouse over an object, hold down the right click, and you'll get this little menu that pops up. Sorry, I keep forgetting these things. So anyways, the purpose of having more subdivisions is, let's say we go down to face, that will allow us to select individual faces. So as you can see, I'm able to select those, I can move those, I can do whatever I need to do, I can grab multiple faces, I can move those wherever I want. That's going to come into the play of modeling later on, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. Vertex, it allows you to click on individual dots of where 2 edges meet. So you can move those individually, and then you have edge, which just allows you to click on a single edge. Something else I think is worth noting, whenever you have it selected on edge, you can double click on an edge and it will select that entire edge loop. An edge loop, let me click on this tool. Oops, wrong tool, Jimmy. Okay, so this one line right here that is highlighted, this is what's called an edge loop. That's basically what loops all the way around. The tool I'm using, which is right up here, this is called the edge loop tool. Sometimes you may not need an edge that loops all the way around, or maybe you just need to delete some faces off of or some edges to lower your resolution. The less poly count you have, the better rendering you're going to have, but also you're losing detail on whatever poly object you have. So in this case, I don't really need this edge loop. If you come up here, you'll see this. This right here will delete vertices and edges attached to the selection. In this case, we have this entire edge loop right here that's highlighted. We can click on that, and as you can see, it goes away. And this guy right here needs to go away. Object mode, that basically takes you out of edge, vertex, vertex face, face, multi, UV. It takes you out of all of that. I'll get into UV a little bit later on. I don't know if I'm going to get into it with this tutorial video or if it'll be the next. I'll keep you updated. So, picnic. Where were we? Oh, that's right, 2x4s. Okay, so the wood that they use is usually 2x4s. And here's exactly why I like just clicking. So I already know that this has to be, it's got to be basically just a 2x4. Essentially, I can pretend that the width right here is, say, 2 inches. So essentially, I'll have to just, take this face and drag it out. But instead of doing it that way, is what I can simply do is just make this a 2. And so now that is a very beautiful looking 2x4. I don't know how you feel about it, but so far it's looking good. So let me go ahead and just drag this over. Now, right now, yeah, I need to fix my computer. I've been lazy about it. So right now we have this beautiful looking 2x4, but it looks kind of big compared to the grid. If you press R on the keyboard and click the very middle here, this will scale in the Y, this will scale in the X, and this will scale in the Z. And of course you have handles right here. By clicking on one of those, you can actually scale it in two different axes. In this case, this green one down here is X and Z. This blue one is X and Y. And the red one right here is Y and Z. So if I were going to scale this down, I can scale it down like so. And I'm also going to talk about this window over here real quickly. I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but I will go over it a little bit. So more than likely, the only tabs they're going to see is going to be Attribute Editor and Channel Box / Layer Editor. So under the channel box, this is basically the channels for whatever object you're working with. You can come in here, you can drag and click, and you can highlight multiple selections. You can do the same thing with scale and things like that. You can change those values. And let me say that we move it right here, and we're like, this position for this part of a 2x4 is perfect. I do not want to move it. A real simple thing you can do is click on where it says Translate X, Y, and Z, which that's what makes the object move. You can right-click, and you can actually come down here to Freeze. You can actually freeze a translate, or you can also lock selected values. So as you can see, we have that right there. And if I'm on Translate, no matter what I do, I cannot move it from this position. So even by clicking that handle, it's not going anywhere. I can still rotate it, and I can still scale it, but I cannot move it. To undo that, just simply select all three. Click on that, and you'll actually come down here to Unlock Selected. And you can also tell if it's locked or not because you'll have these little blue tabs right here before the number. And as you can see now, I can move it again. Real quickly, hotkeys: Control Z, undo. Control X, cut. Control C, copy. Control V, paste. Now, we're all very familiar with that, but one thing about Maya, because as you saw earlier, all I did was just move it like that. I'm sure some of you are wondering, how did he do that? The way I did that is actually very, very simple. So you'll select whatever object you need to duplicate. You'll hold down Control and press D. This will duplicate your objects. And I'll get into that just a little bit more here in just a second. So I'm going to go into Face, and I need to look at my lovely picnic. Okay, so I'm just going to make this up just a little bit. So is what I'm going to do, now that I have this face selected, and if you notice that your camera is not centered on the object you're working with, simply select your object, or you can select the component you're working with, such as a face or a vertice or whatever. Press F on the keyboard. What that will do is that will actually frame the object centered to the camera, so whenever you rotate, you'll rotate around that object. Little FYI. I'm pretty sure you're going to be using that button a lot too. So what we want to do is we want to go into the face, and we're just going to move this up, probably right about there, and then we'll move it over, something like that. Nothing too crazy. We'll select, go back into object mode, and I could duplicate this like I did before. Come over here to scale on the X, and I can just simply add, no, not right there. I could just simply add a negative value in front of that. You might run into this, and you can actually see through it. Now, is what's going on, if you run into this problem, Maya that you're working with inside the scene is not using two-sided objects. And this is actually very important to know, because if you were to export this out into Unity or Unreal, your object would be completely invisible except from like the way you're viewing it. So you'd only see this face and this face. So obviously we're not running into that problem right now because I just it's a little buggy. But if you ever do run into that problem, is what I want to show you is if you go to mesh display and we have reverse. So if you ever have it where it's like really weird looking, simply click that. Basically, it's going to look like this inside of Unity. So if you ever see it where it looks like this inside of Maya, that's all you have to do is just go up to mesh display, reverse. It'd probably help if I do that. So if you're wondering how I just did that without clicking anything, the G key on the keyboard will actually redo whatever last tool you used. So if I click a cube right there, all I have to do is just press G on the keyboard, and I can create another one like so. In this case, because I went into mesh display and I hit reverse, it still had that tool selected, so I was able to reuse it. So the other option you have for duplicating objects, and like I said, I'm just going to go over this real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this and move it down here, something like that. Might move those in, I don't know. Haven't decided yet. If you go up to, is it modified? No, I think it's edit. Yeah, it's edit. So right here you have duplicate, which is Control D. 1 second. Try not to kill you all with my coughs. So under edit you have duplicate special. Now this little window right here, this can actually be very useful. So let's say you're creating the fan blades of, say, an airplane, like the engine of an airplane. You can actually use this tool right here, and it will duplicate as many copies as you need. All you have to do is just specify how many you need, which is right here, the number of copies. If it's going to rotate, in my case, this will rotate, or I'm sorry, it will not rotate, but we will scale it on the negative axis. And I'm able to look at that because of this right here. So I know I need to scale on X, so I need to make X a -1, and all this looks good. And then all you do is just hit duplicate special. The other option you have, if you notice, whenever it duplicated special, it kind of like it was intersecting. A way to prevent that is to hold down Control and press G on the keyboard. This will actually group your objects together. It doesn't make them one mesh, it just creates them as a group. And so if you're working on something that has perfect symmetry, this is the way to do it. So after you've done that, we've already used the duplicate special tool. But if you hold down Control Shift D, that's the duplicate special hotkey. And as you can see, it duplicates everything across the grid right here at the 0, because that's where the pivot is. If you were to actually change this pivot, and by the way, I'm going to press Insert on the keyboard, you can actually move the pivot wherever you need the pivot to be. But keep in mind that by moving the pivot here, if you were to duplicate these objects, in fact, I'm just going to show you this real quick. I'm going to move the pivot right here. So if I were to duplicate these objects, as you can see now, it duplicates them according to where that pivot is. So that's something to keep in mind as well. Let me go back to the picnic table. Alright, so next we have these lovely 2x4s that go across the front of those faces. So the way I'm going to do this, I think I'm just going to do it this way. We'll click on the cube tool, and we'll just click somewhere in the scene. Just go over right here. I'm not too worried about making this one perfect. I'm going to show you 2 different ways you can do this. So I'm just going to get it right about there. Basically all I'm doing is just lining. I'm lining the edges up with the sides, and that's pretty close. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm trying to line up where this edge meets this edge, and get close. I'm not too terribly worried about it because this is actually going to be, it's not going to be hidden, but it won't be like super viewable. It's not going to be the thing that's going to get the most attention. So anyways, I want to rotate this 90 degrees, and then I'm just going to move it up, over, and I'm just going to scale it. Thinking probably right about there. Now whenever I move this out, one thing I want to, I want you all to make note of. So I just moved this out here so now you can see a gap. I'm actually going to go in where it just barely intersects. The point of that is, I don't know if any of y'all have ever worked with wood, but whenever you actually bolt something down or you screw it down real tight, a lot of times you'll actually see the wood kind of warping in just a little bit, you know, on intersecting points like that. Not always, but sometimes, and it's just a little extra detail. So that's one way of doing it. I'm going to go ahead and Control D, just move this over. And if you're wondering why I didn't do the group and duplicate special, it's because whenever I duplicated this set over here from this set, I didn't have it set to the pivot point as a group. So that's why I just hit Control D and moved it. So as you can see right there, just a small little intersection. For the 2x4s, now we could do this all over again. Sometimes you may not have that luxury where it's like, man, I've already created too many scales. Don't worry, I'm going to show you another way you can do it. So if we click on face, and we click just one side. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this, create a duplicate object and move it out here. You can do this by clicking on the edges, the face, the vertex, it doesn't matter. All I'm doing is grabbing all 4 of these vertices. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You'll click and drag to select the first set of vertices you need. If you hold down Shift, you can select another set of vertices. Now let's say you click on that vertex right there and you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to do that. The easiest way to do this is hold down Control and that will remove the vertices. If you hold down Control Shift, as you can see I'm clicking on this, but it's not unselecting it. Shift select will actually choose the opposite of. So if it's selected and you shift select, it will deselect. And if it's deselected and you shift select, it will select. So if we select these 2 up here, we'll hold down Control Shift, select these down here as well. Now these are fine for now. Press R on the keyboard, go to your scale tool, and just bring this all the way in. Here's where Shift select is helpful. You hold down Shift. So now we just selected the other side, and we do the same thing. There's our 2x4. So if scaling is an issue and you've already scaled it a bunch of times and you just don't want to go through that hassle again, that's the other way you can do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to first change the pivot of this object. So up here, this is called your pivot tool. This will actually, not your pivot tool. This will center your pivot point on your poly object. Now when it centers it, wherever the center is on that object, it's going to put it right at the very center of that object. So let me go and press F on the keyboard. I'll go back to, I'm going to frame this basically. That's what F stands for, is frame. But I'm going to be right here, so that's why I can work a little easier. So I'm going to rotate this on the x-axis. I'm going to make it a 90. And I'm going to move this over here. Now, sometimes you'll come into this scene where it's like, I think I need to, I think I need to make it like that. No, that's too long. Here's where we get into the space bar. If you tap the space bar once, you'll come into this window. If you started, this is the window you've seen. I should have said something, but meh. So right here on the top Y, this is actually a camera facing down from the Y-axis. If you look right here, front Z, this is a camera facing backwards on the Z-axis. Side X, I don't know which axis this is facing, but it's looking at the side of whatever object you're working with. These views are basically orthographic views. So a good example is my drink right here. If this was an orthographic view, you wouldn't be able to tell that this was rounded. Obviously you can tell it's rounded because we got light on this side and shade on this side. But as an orthographic view, you would not have that. And so when it comes to modeling, this is the window you're going to be switching back and forth from constantly. So is what we need to do is we need to go to the top view. So whichever view you need to go into, you'll move the mouse over that window and you'll press spacebar. And whatever the mouse is over, that's the window that will enable. So I already know the top view's here. Just double tap and it brings you right to the top view that you need. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to move this right about here. I'm going to move it forward, and I'm actually going to move it a little offset. I'm thinking something like that should be fine. We'll do the Control D. We'll select both of these. Wait, how many were there? Yeah, there's just 2. And then across the top there's 2, 4, 6. Okay. So we'll select both of these. Control D. And I'm going to move them offset as well. So the next thing we need to do is Control D. I'm going to move these right about here. And right here on the front Z window, I'm going to move these up right about there. I think that looks good. Control D and Control D. And then what we'll do is we'll drag and select where we select these objects. So as you can see, I'm already running into a slight problem. It doesn't quite reach. Now you can simply add, you can just click on this one and do another Control D. It doesn't matter. The other option you have is you can select these 2 and move these in, probably right about there. Now obviously this is going to off-center everything, but we can always just come in here because we have about, I don't know, it looks like almost 1 full square unit. So as long as we move those there. Oh, wait a minute. Let me click and drag, so that's why I'm actually selecting both polygons. Because if I just select this one, go into vertex, as you can see, there's something back there. So this is where we're going to get into combining mesh together. So I just clicked and dragged, and this will actually select both polygons that's on the opposite ends of this table. We'll come up here to mesh, and we'll scroll down to combine. The combine tool is this little double flat square thingy with a circle around it. We're going to go ahead and combine these, and then we'll just come up here to vertex. Now as you can see, in fact I'll even click off of this. Now as you can see, now that they're combined, I just can click once, go into vertex. As you remember from before I moved this, there was still something back there. Now they're both moving. Whenever you combine it, it basically just combines whatever mesh. I mean, whatever objects you have selected, it's getting combined. So the other reason for doing that, I don't know if you can see it on the image. You can kind of see it. Above this, there's another piece of wood that goes across here that basically these top pieces just kind of rest on. So I actually want to make sure that those are selected. We'll hit Control D. And I'm going to move this up here where it's actually cutting through those. Oh, that's too much. If you are in a scene like this where it's like I can't tell where that is, I'm just going to go ahead and enlarge this to full screen. So up here we got some tools, obviously. I'm going to go and click on this one. This one right here is wireframe. You're going to work in this window quite a bit. The next one is the one we were just on, which is smooth shade, which you can't really tell it's a smooth shade because everything is just cubes. So you can't really see any smooth shading with that. Use default material. This is whatever material the poly object has. And then we have wireframe on all materials. This basically allows you to be able to see a wireframe, and this, I'm not going to lie, I use this one a lot. So let's go ahead and press R on the keyboard, or just click over here. We need to scale it. We're going to scale down, and once again I'm going to intersect just a little bit. I'm going to scale out like that. I click on the vertex. I'm going to bring this out, probably right about there. I'm going to do the same thing right over here, and then I'm going to grab these top. It doesn't have to be perfect. In fact, this is one of those things because most picnic tables are hand built, probably by guys like me who's like, looks good. So actually, imperfections are really going to sell this scene. And I'll get into that a little bit more here in just a second. So that's your basic picnic table. Not too complex. you know, it's not too bad. I'm going to go ahead and save this as picnic. I cannot type table. Okay, so you don't have to type it exactly like this. Doing C# scripting, that's why it's weird like that. Nothing to be like, eh? Yeah, so, yeah. I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder, tut folder, and I'm going to go ahead and save this in here. So, one thing I did not do throughout this tutorial is I'm not saving it as often as what I normally do. Usually every 3 to 5 minutes, just out of instinct, I hit Control S. So, if you look down here at the window, that's basically all it is. I just hit it, saved it, and just kept on working. So, what we want to do now is, basically, we want to, let's go and just create a little plane, something for it to sit on. For that, I'm just going to click on this little square up here. This is called a polyplane primitive. So, if you zoom out, you can just click and drag, go anywhere you want, as big as you want. It doesn't really matter. As what I want to do is, under the subdivision's width and height, I'm just going to make that a 20. Yeah, let's say 25. I think that should be sufficient. So one thing you'll notice, this is flat. It's very, very flat. I'm going to go ahead and group this bench real quick. Now, if you group an object and you try to click on that grouped object, you'll notice it doesn't do anything. If you don't have this little tab called Outliner, just simply go up to Windows, and you're going to scroll down here where it says Outliner. So we have a group right here, and it's actually, I think, group 3. Yeah, group 3 is going to be our picnic table. If you double click right here in the name, you can picnic table. You can rename it that way. And as you can see, we have all of our poly objects in there. So there's that. Okay, onward. So we have our plane right down here. Let me go ahead and click out of that. So what we want to do is we want to try to think how to explain this. Most picnic tables aren't sitting on something that's perfectly flat. We want some randomness. So up here, there's a sculpting tag. Yeah, tag. No, there's a sculpting tab. Yeah. Right here, this is going to allow us to push it. Now, if you open that up and this is all you see, there's one of two possibilities that's going on. Either A, your brush size is just meh. Obviously, you can't see my hand, so what you want to do is hold down B on the keyboard and move the mouse to the left. To the left will actually scale it in. If you've done that a couple of times and you're still not seeing anything, hold down B and move the mouse to the right. As you can see now, I'm getting something. The other thing I want to mention, this is worth noting, if you just click on the scale tool, as you can see, nothing's happening. Not scale tool. If you just click on the sculpting tool, nothing will happen. You actually have to select your object, or have your object selected, to be able to do anything. And, you know, I'm like, you can sit there and try to click and drag, but you want to be careful, because if you don't have it selected and you do that, well, look what just happened. So that's why you want to be careful with that. Personally, I just like to make sure that whatever object I'm going to be modeling, or sculpting, I mean, is selected before doing anything. So I'm actually going to double click on this tool right here. By double clicking on a tool, it will actually open up a window for you. So I'm going to keep this window right here so you can see exactly what I'm doing. So the size, I've already mentioned how you can change that just by holding down the B key and then moving the mouse back and forth. Size units, this basically just defines, like, you know, what the size is brush according to what units of measurement. In this case, we're doing it by the world measurement, which is just a generic standard unit. And then the strength, this is how much it pulls or pushes or whatever. So as you can see, by doing this, I'm just going to move around. I'm just going to, you know, just randomly click on different areas. What I'm doing is I'm actually pushing parts of this up. So as you can see, now we're starting to get a little bit more imperfections. You can also bring this up and just kind of, just randomly click around, just give it some randomness. I wouldn't recommend going real crazy with it, but randomness is good. Symmetry. So if you have symmetry on, there's object X, Y, and Z. So it's just like you'd expect. If you're modeling like a face, like somebody's face or something, if you're doing it on this side, as you can see this dot that's like, oh, wait, wrong way. There's a little black dot that's moving adjacent to where that one is. Basically, whatever you do on one side, it's going to do on the other side. Same thing with, oops. Why did it disappear? So anyways, yeah, that's center normal, symmetry off. Actually, I'm going to go back to Y. Okay, so that's basically the symmetry tool and the sculpting tool and all that. Whenever you're working on some of these scenes, it is actually kind of important to keep one thing in mind. So right now you can't see the ground because I have two-sided faces off. If you are wanting to make sure that you stay as professional as possible and you can see both sides, inside the Attribute Editor tab, you're going to see where it says P-Plane. If you scroll down to Display, is it Display? No, it's not. Maybe it is. I'm trying to remember where it was. Might be under... You would think I'd remember this. Object Display. No, not Object Display. I cannot remember where it is because it has been so long since I've done it. But one thing that I can see it on, under the P-Plane shape, make sure this is unclicked. Okay, that's what it is. Double-sided. Okay, so yeah, it's under the render stats, under P-Plane shape or whatever poly cube shape, whatever it is you're working with. It's going to be the second tab. And under the render stats, just make sure double-sided is unchecked. So what you see inside of Maya is what you're going to see inside of Unity or Unreal. And the same principle with 3ds Max and also Blender, I believe. Although with those two programs, I don't know how to get to them. It's been so long since I've used either one of them, I just don't remember. I'm more of a Maya guy. Moving on. So one thing I would recommend, make sure that the table, wherever the legs are going through the ground just a little bit. That to me looks good. I'm happy with that. I can sleep at night. So next thing we want to do is, if you want to go crazy with yours like I did with mine, let me go ahead and just click on one of these. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here to the Poly Modeling tab. And I'm going to click on this Edge Loop tool. So I'm just going to create, random... There we go. I'm just going to create a few random edge loops. Click on this one. I'm going to do the same thing. You don't have to go... Okay, it can have another one. You don't have to go real crazy with it. Just some randomness. I mean, it doesn't hurt. Really? There we go. So all I'm doing is just adding random edge loops. Nothing real special. So what I want to do is I'm going to go back to object mode. I cannot see it. And I'm just going to select all of these. I'm going to go into vertex. Of course it wouldn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because they're not combined. So let's go and combine those real quick. Yay! Okay, vertex. Let me think how I want to do this. Actually, I think that's what I want to do instead is I'm going to double click on these edge loops right here. I'm actually going to move these down just a little bit, not too much. Add some warpage to this wood. Something like that. Might also go ahead and move this one out. There we go. Just a little bit. Not like I said, nothing too crazy. I'm going to actually bring this one up. I'm going to bring this one down just a little bit. This one, I'll just go up with it. I'll go ahead and click on both of these, and I'll just bring these down just a little bit. Let me click on that one. I think I'm just going to bring this one up. By the way, if you're hold down Control to deselect, by double clicking you is the same thing as selecting. You actually deselect that whole edge loop. So I'm going to bring this one down. Bring this whole section down. I'm actually going to make this one where it warps up. Then I probably move that way up too high. Oh yeah, that's way too high. That just looks all sorts of ugly. Okay, so that's how you create a warped wood look. And it still doesn't quite look right. So what I like to do afterwards, I like to come back through here and add just a few more edge loops. Like so. It'll make sense why I'm adding them like this here in just a second, I promise. So we have those edge loops right there. If we spacebar, right click, face, I'm just going to drag a line right there. Hopefully I didn't go too wild. Oh, missed one. Hopefully I didn't go too wild. Okay, so yeah, I should have just these faces selected. Looks like I missed a couple. Things happen. So, yeah, I missed a few. So I'm just going to come in here real quick. These two overlapping squares, this is X-ray mode. If you click on that, you can see through it. So I'm just going to drag the mouse right there. And I should have all those selected, and I do. So with just the sidewall selected, if you press W on the keyboard, move it up just a little bit. So nothing too crazy. I'm actually going to move it up just a little bit more. There we go. This will actually give it like a really good warped wood look. And then last thing we want to do, you can either smooth it or you can do a bevel to it. If you're worried about a poly count like I was, actually an easier way to do this, let me just click on face. So I basically just selected this whole section. I'm going to move the mouse over here, shift select right here, and then I'm going to hold down control. I'm going to do this from the top view. I'm going to hold down control and deselect all these. Now you might wonder what the point of that was, but actually I have all these outside faces selected. So the next tool we're going to use is called extrude. That's going to be this icon right here where it's like you have you have three white squares and this big orange square just popping up out of nowhere. That is under the mesh? No, it's under one of these. It might be under mesh tools. Man, it's been so long since I've had to pull it up from here. I just do not remember. It's actually kind of nice. So anyways, it's under one of these drop-down box menus somewhere. I apologize, I cannot remember where it is. If you do not have it, oh there it is, it's under Mesh Tools. If you do not have it, as you see I have a bunch of empty space. Leave this Control-Shift, click on Edit Mesh, find the tool you're looking for, let off, and as you can see, it pops up here. And I got a cough again. Boy, I apologize for that, people. So that's how you bring it up there. If you need to, and you're like, oh, I don't need this after all, just right-click on it like you would, just go down to delete, and there you go. So now, back to where we were, with all these outside faces selected, just the ones on the end caps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the extrude. You think I remember what that is. And this little doohickey pops up. This is the tool I was talking about earlier. It's like the universal manipulator tool. I don't remember what exactly it's called because I never use it. Except for these very rare cases where after you've clicked on an object, this will pop up. What I'm going to do is just move this out just a little bit. That's too much. Right there. The purpose of this, I'm actually going to show you real quick. This is where we want to smooth it. So if I click on one of these, I go up to Mesh, scroll down to Smooth. That's what happens. Looks like an ice cube slash spear that's it's not right. Control Z undoes whatever action. However, if we have these end caps, when we go down to smooth, as you can see, it gives it a much better look. Let's say you're looking right here and you're like, oh, but that's way too rounded, Jimmy. What do we do? Let me go ahead and undo the last smooth. You can actually do the exact same thing. The only thing is if you do that, you're going to have overlapping. I just now realized that. Duh. So if we go, the two ways we can do this, if we can do the edge loop and just come through here and just add these right about here where this makes a square, like so. You can do it that way. I am going to cheat just a little bit, so I'm going to go into my wrong view, Jimmy. I'm going to go into this view right here. I'm just going to kind of come through here and select all of these. And this will make sense here in just a second. So I have all of these selected. I do not have the top selected, and I do not have the bottom selected. But all the way around it, on all of these planks, it's selected all the way around. So now I come here to Shift Select, and now it's just the tops and bottoms. I'm going to click on the Extrude tool again. Just, whoa, that's way too much. Let me zoom in, see what I'm working with. Meh. So now if we off-click on that, instead of keep hitting the smooth tool under the mesh tools, if we look at the keyboard and press the number 3, this will actually show us what it's going to look like smooth. That actually looks not too bad. I think I can live with that. If rendering this scene during, during actual usage inside the UI is making the computer too laggy, simply press 1. Right now you're not going to run into any problems. But if you're doing this with all the objects in your scene, it's still not going to have any problems on my PC. It's just laughing at me, except for the temperature down there. It's a little concerning, but meh. Larger scenes you will run into issues. So one thing I like to do is after I've looked at something like, okay, that's good, immediately before I even deselect it, I'm automatically pressing 1 and checking everything else. So if you want, you can replace the benches with these. If you want it perfect, you can leave this like this. If you want the rustic look like what I have, this is the way to do it. So I'm going to go ahead, let's see, I'm at 50 minutes right now. I'm actually going to stop the tutorial video right here. I'll talk a little bit more in the next tutorial video about UV texturing. I'm also going to go into your render settings and things like that, and I'll explain how to do a lot of that as well. Please, please, please message me on Discord if you're in the same, what's this word? If you're in the same class as me, message me on Discord, either in the general chat or you can PM me, private message. I'll try to give you one-on-one training. If you have any questions, I ask that you, ask those questions. So many times it's like, a lot of, okay, here's a good example. My experience is, oh, okay, I don't need to ask this. I'll just figure it out. This is back when Maya 7 was around, which I'm sure the course director knows that was like 2004. I'd be like, I can figure this out. I spend hours instead of just going to the discussion board asking how you do something, and I could have found the answer in like 5 minutes. So if there's anything you're uncertain about, anything you're unsure about, please ask me. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. As I'm sure there are instructors or even the course director on here, I'm sure he's more than happy to answer questions as well. I'd rather y'all be 100% sure instead of being 85% sure and missing something. So the next video, I'm not going to have this little thing down here because a lot of it y'all already know who I am, everything like that. I kept this down here so that way I could point at different things and show you examples like this cup, about how it's not orthographic and things like that. So anyways, that's going to do it for this tutorial video, and I guess I'll see y'all on Discord.